There we go. Thank you very much. Had a gavel malfunction, or perhaps that was gravel malfunction. Welcome back, Mr. Curtis. And may we call roll, please?
Ms. Carano. Mr. Kerrigan. Ms. Cooney. Mr. Curtis. Mr. Dortch.
Here.
Mr. Finland. Mr. Flynn. Here. Mr. Hall. Mr. Hawkins. Here. Mr. Humke.
Here.
Mr. Sullivan.
Here.
Ms. Weber. Ms. Zadra. Here.
We have a quorum, right? Yes. I guess we do. All right. We find that a quorum is present. Welcome to a meeting dedicated to the State Taxation Department. And thus the date. Would Mr. Curtis, would you please lead us in the pledge to the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Let us go to initial public comment. Madam Secretary, do you have requests to speak? There are no requests to speak. Seeing no one else wishing to give public comment, we will move on. Item 5, review and approval of the minutes.
Move to approve.
There's a motion and a second motion by Commissioner Dortch, Councilman Dortch, and second by Ms. Carano. Is there any discussion of that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say no. That passes unanimously. There's been a request now to take certain items out of order, and Chris is going to remind me what those items are, but I know that one of them is approval of the budget.
The fiscal 13-14 budget, the goals for the CEO, and then also the third thing is the new insurance program proposal.
Okay. Let us take the budget first.
Brian will lead us in a review of the proposed budget.
Oh, I'm supposed to
You get to use the gavel again.
hereby open a public hearing on this item. Mr. Rivers.
Thank you very much. Let me get this going. All right, you have before you the budget. We did review this last month at both the finance and the full board meeting. We also had a finance committee meeting scheduled for last week that we did not have a quorum, but we did run through the items that were on the agenda with Mr. Sullivan. And again, just to reiterate, you have the slides in front of you will have 4 years of actual, the current budget and outlook, which is essentially 9 months of actuals with 3 months of plan, as well as the current proposed budget for fiscal 13-14. And the key changes year over year are we have both bowling groups coming back in 13-14 that we had in 12-13. We do not have Safari Club in the next year 13-14 budget, and we do not have the additional revenues that we realized from the GIC termination in fiscal 12-13. So with that, revenues year over year projected to decline approximately $2 million or 5.6%. The largest portion of that is driven by the income that we received through that guaranteed investment contract. On the room tax side, we're showing slight growth. We've got about a 0.5% growth in cash occupied rooms. ADR is actually almost exactly flat to what we're projecting in the outlook, and sadly that puts us back to fiscal 8-9 room rates if you look at the trend. So we've had literally no growth over essentially 6 years in ADR, and rooms are relatively the same as well. So treading water essentially over the last 5 years, all things said and done there. On facility revenues, you'll see that the convention center's down. That's due primarily to Safari Club again. We also have the Reno Event Center up. Joe's taken on a more aggressive approach to book shows down there coming into next fiscal year. We did have a very good beginning to fiscal 12-13, but the last half of 12-13 has been pretty lackluster down there in terms of shows that we've put on. All said and done, $93,000 projected increase year over year between the 5 facilities, or 1.1%. Other income, again, is down 2.2 million. That's driven by the income we realized from the guaranteed investment contract in fiscal 12-13. The other revenues are flat year over year. Operating expenses are down slightly. Payroll's up a little bit. Supplies and services, the largest decrease there is related to the tents that we have to provide when Safari Club is here. Those are paid through the Convention Center Supply and Service account. Travel's up a bit with the additional cost and full staffing in convention and tourism sales. And we've got a slight decrease in promo and advertising, a little bit of a bump in special projects as it relates to site fees and payments to groups for incentives to coming to the area. But all said and done, it works out to about a $200,000 or 1% decrease year over year. Capital and other expenses, this is where there are some changes. On the debt service, we peak at our $9.5 million number that we came to about a year and a half ago through the debt refunding. It will stabilize at that point for the next 20 years, so we won't see changes in that, assuming no changes to the debt. Grant is driven by the money that we push back to Incline Village that's required through NRS, so that's driven by the rim tax revenues that are anticipated. Capital improvements, we have $315,000. In the budget we brought forward last month, that number was $200,000, $100,000 of which goes to the Convention Center for a sound system, another $100,000 at the Livestock Event Center. That's primarily going to be used for a marquee and some restrooms out there for things that Snafflebit would like to see to continue coming to the area. And then we've also laid in a $110,000 capital reserve to start that process, and we are working through the reserve analysis that Mr. Curtis requested at the Finance Committee in April, I believe it was. With that, all said and done, works out to about a $40,000 decrease. We would love to see more capital dollars in there, hopefully as room tax revenues continue to grow, but at this point, that's what's laid in there. We're going to take care of the most pressing needs and hopefully not have to use that $100,000 next year and start to build a little bit of a kitty for true reserve. But at this point, $310,000 is what's budgeted for capital. Come on. Oops. Now I'm all over the place. On the expense trends, again, this is broken down: total facility expenditures, sales and marketing expenditures, G&A, capital and other, and then total. You'll see the total, all said and done, year over year is about a $250,000 decrease. Big chunk of that is at the facilities, again, driven by Safari Club expenses. Sales and marketing is essentially flat. G&A is down a little bit, primarily driven by the rent expenses in this building that'll go down beginning in October. And then the capital and other is driven by the debt and capital. And then the last slide here is the margins, which is truly a net performance by facility, so or by department or facility. So for facilities, the expectation is we'll perform about $200,000 better than the current year. Sales and marketing is essentially flat. Again, G&A is essentially flat. Capital and debt's driven by the guaranteed investment contract. Rim tax is up a little bit, which all said and done gets us down to balanced budget for the bottom line. Also included, the last slide, is the non-routine expenses that are budgeted. That's something that came forward last year, but these are any large payments. You'll see the site fees to USBC are the largest on there, but the special events are laid in there, and any other known anticipated non-routine expenses are laid in there with the amounts budgeted and the anticipated month of spend. And with that, we would submit the fiscal 13-14 budget for any questions and approval.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions regarding the budget? Mr. Hawkins.
Hi, Brian. Are there any future payouts scheduled for Safari Club?
No.
They haven't been paid out?
No.
Okay, and back on the tab for other income, maybe you mentioned something just now, but I didn't catch it. Under investment interest, there's a 199.9% difference between the budget and the outlook, I guess.
That was our guaranteed investment contract that was paying us a little over 6% that we terminated back in, I believe it was September. So we received a lump sum payout essentially for the future earnings we would have realized on that within fiscal 12-13.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Flynn.
What's the net effect from Safari in terms of the additional tax revenue that we received minus the expenses that we wouldn't have to?
To us, it works out to about a $300,000 loss as an agency with Safari being here. So it costs us $300,000 for them to be in Washoe County.
So technically a net savings of $300,000.
It's a commonly misunderstood fact. Most people assume we're making lots of money on the group, and obviously we're supporting all the revenues that it generates for the community, but it was a very expensive proposition for us, so that's the upside, I guess.
All right,
Councilman Dortch.
thank you. When you say it's a $300,000 savings to us, but that doesn't take into account the lost room tax revenue that we're not.
That is truly a net number. We realize somewhere around 300,000 in revenue. We put out another
So that's net.
300,000 for the tent, and then we had the other 250,000 incentive payment and some other things that we have to do for them. But that's truly a net number, yes.
Mr. Curtis.
Thank you. I think that you're to be commended in coming up with a budget that appears balanced, and I've gone through the assumptions, and they appear reasonable. I am looking forward to the reserve analysis. I think that that's very important as an organization. We have to understand where we are in terms of our reserves for replacement, and I think that's going to be revealing to us also, because we do not have a means by which to go ahead and maintain many of these facilities. Now that we have the additional tax downtown, there are some facilities that have the potential for maintenance, but a true capital reserve analysis will understand how much we should be setting aside on an annual basis, and I would wager to say at this point that it's going to be far more than the $100,000 that's going to be identified, or that is identified in the budget. It seems to me that we need to understand that number, and we need to recognize also what may happen if we don't realize this formula. In other words, I don't know what the future holds, and I'm prepared to go ahead and support the budget as presented. But the question, it seems to me, that this board needs to ask itself is what happens if things don't go quite according to Hoyle? Do we have a plan B? Do we understand what potential there is for a plan B, even recognizing that we may be in the hole relative to the capital facilities? At this point, the only place that I see any potential for reduction in costs is in the marketing department. It's a discretionary expense, so to speak. And that's kind of our lifeblood. So I would say that while the budget appears fairly positive, and I'm willing to go ahead and support it, I have this deep, uneasy feeling in my gut that tells me that things are not good in the neighborhood, and that we're skating on thin ice at this point. And thanks to the good efforts of this organization and the staff, we may be clawing ourselves out. One of the reports that we used to see is the Smith Travel Report, which kind of gave us an indication as to how we were doing against our peers. I know we don't have that now. But I'd be curious to understand how we're doing in relationship to our peers, and I'll bring that up again later. But I think that we have to be mindful that the capital reserves that we've spoken of need to be recognized as a real cost to this organization. And while at this point we're essentially shuffling it under the table, that we need to understand that, and we need to deal with it, and we as an organization and as a board are responsible to do that. So that's my thought.
Thank you, sir. Are there any other questions regarding the budget? Seeing none, this is a public hearing. Do you have any requests to speak on the budget item? Is there any person wishing to give public comment on the budget item? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing and entertain a motion to approve. There's motion by Mr. Sullivan, second by Mr. Curtis. Is there any discussion of that motion? Under discussion, let me say that if people are, let's be honest, the only purpose for this meeting is to satisfy state taxation to send a tentative budget. And as such, please don't jet off, because this resolution has to be completed, and then each member present has to sign. Everyone, regardless of their vote, has to sign. Is that right, Council? Okay. So that is that's coming to you soon. I see Mr. Hawkins is starting now. All those in favor of the motion to approve the budget as presented, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. That passes unanimously, considering the persons present. Thanks very much. Mr. President, could you take us to the next item desired?
The next item would be the RSVA President CEO goals for fiscal year 2013-14. These were discussed at the April 10th RSCVA Finance Committee meeting, and at that committee meeting, it was determined that the item should be addressed at the next Marketing Sales Committee meeting on April 16th and brought back to May Finance Committee for review and discussion before going to the full board. We did address it at the Marketing Committee, however, the Marketing Committee requested it to come back at the May 6th Marketing Committee to reflect some recommended changes. Those have all been accomplished, and the goals are now put forth as follows. Number one, generate 10 major national media stories in support of our four-season destination resort positioning, worth 10%. 2, achieve annual convention and meeting sales goal of 228,000 definite room nights at 35%. Increase year-over-year attendance by 10% at ASAE exhibit from 190 to 209, and DC sales mission from 96 to 115. That's 10%. Number 4, increase year-over-year June 1 to August 31 visitation to visitrenotahoe.com by 10% from 500,096 to 550,016. That is 10%. 5, increase the pipeline of tentative meeting and convention business by 30% year-over-year as of May 1st, from 392,000 to 509,600. That is 10%. Number 6, create 2 iconic attractions to draw tourist photo opportunities as confirmed by the Marketing and Sales Committee. That is 5%. Number 7, develop new sources for an additional $300,000 of capital funds annually. That is 10%. And number 8, perform at or better than board-approved fiscal 2013-14 balanced budget, also at 10%. So those are the goals that were reviewed and agreed upon with the Sales and Marketing Committee, and I submit them for discussion and approval.
Thank you. Council, do you have any comments?
No, that summed it up completely.
Thank you very much. These goals have been through the committees, marketing. I think we have 14 committees. It's hard to recall.
It went finance, marketing, and then I guess it was on finance, but we did not have a quorum.
Yes, and they were looked at by the persons present, I guess. All right, any comments on the goals? Any discussion? Mr. Curtis?
I have a couple questions and comments. These are obviously tied into item number I, relative to President and CEO performance evaluation and compensation policy. Am I correct in understanding that the goals that are identified here reflect the standards by which the incentive pay is to be established?
That is correct under the policy.
And so, is it possible that these goals could be accomplished and other aspects of the operation of the organization could fall apart, but we would still be in some way responsible to provide an incentive pay on top of the base salary? Is that correct under the reading of the presentation?
Under the policy, under the second bullet point, paragraph 4, under the definition of incentive pay, it does say an incentive pay award is given in the sole discretion of the board. Therefore, if there were other performance issues on just the day-to-day general job duties, separate and apart from any of these incentive goals, it would be within the sole discretion of the board whether or not an incentive pay award would be awarded.
I've said this before, and I'll repeat it now for the record, that I am opposed to this approach to identifying specific goals for incentive pay. In my experience, it works poorly in the long term. I think that's going to have very little effect on this group right now in terms of the vote, but I am not going to support it for that reason. I think Chris is doing a great job, and I think that we're lucky to have him. And as far as I'm concerned, he deserves a bigger bonus than he received. I mentioned that at the last meeting. Nevertheless, I think this process is flawed, and I will not support it.
Any other questions, comments, discussion?
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead.
We've had that kind of discussion, and particularly at governance, which has kind of been, on back burner, trying to get schedules together for going through some of the major stuff. So would it be helpful for you knowing that that will come back through the governance discussion for recommendations for future with the board? Okay.
All right, thank you. Is there any other discussion? Then, council, what motion is desired?
You would seek a motion to approve the CEO goals for fiscal year 13-14.
All right.
So moved.
There is a motion by Councilman Dorch, second by Mr. Sullivan. Is there, let's see, this is an action item. Is there any public comment? Any cards? Any requests? All right. We will close public comment on this item. Is there any discussion of that motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say no. Please show Mr. Curtis being opposed. Anyone else opposed? That was the only one I heard. All right, thank you, that passes. Then to the health insurance item.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is regarding our contract renewal for health benefits for RSCVA employees. In April of this year, Advanced Insurance Solutions, a broker for employee benefits for us, obtained renewal bids for the medical, life, short-term disability, long-term disability, vision, and dental insurance plans for the RSCVA's full-time employees, dependents, and retirees. After negotiating, Anthem has agreed to a rate pass, no change in rate, with no changes at the benefit level, which will be an actual decrease in premium due to Anthem absorbing the new fees and taxes assessed as part of the Affordable Care Act. Dental benefits were modified and the provider changed from Lincoln, where a 14.9% increase was proposed in the renewal rate, to Anthem for a 12.8% decrease from current rates. Vision renewal is a 5% increase with a 2-year rate guarantee. Basic life, accidental death, short-term disability, dependent life, and dependent life retiree rates received a rate pass and a 2-year rate guarantee. Long-term disability renewed at an 8.6% increase and a rate guarantee for 2 years. The original budget estimates reflected a 6% increase in insurance premiums, and medical industry renewals are currently trending between increases of 11 to 15%. So the RCV is very pleased with the renewal rates that were negotiated that are relatively flat over prior year while maintaining similar benefit levels. I can go into more detail if you'd like. A couple of other important points are employees currently have $63,000 of unused allocations from Anthem that can be rolled over. So that's another benefit from this. And we also maintain leverage for negotiating rates next year when the industry is expected to be 25 to 35% up by not negotiating this year. To have a slight overall decrease when we were anticipating a 6% increase, we think is a very, very much a win-win for all concerned. So with that, I submit for questions and approval.
Thank you very much. Are there questions? Mr.
Just
Hawkins.
one, you said it's a net 6% decrease over last year.
We had projected a 6% increase, and in
Okay,
fact,
then what is it actually versus the cost last year?
Essentially, it's flat.
Flat?
Yeah. The rates were guaranteed on some of them for a couple of years. We combined Anthem to take over the dental, which got us a little bit of a decrease on the health, and then tweaked a little bit of the dental, which is the one component that is actually down, truly down year over year, about 10%.
we're benefiting from a very competitive market too, so people are vying for the business.
Are there any other questions? Mr. Curtis?
Couple comments. Number one, nice job. I don't know who negotiated this, but whoever did it did a nice job.
Advanced Insurance Solutions did a nice job for us, and Charlotte worked very closely with them.
Anyway, so, I mean, I think that's really good. And my second question is, can I get in on this program? This is like, I remember when I first started in my career, I saw a plan that was almost this good, and I thought I, would never see it again, and haven't in my profession. So I guess my only comment and thought is, these are incredible benefits, and one of the things we found is that sometimes in an organization, when the benefits are really good, people stick around because of the benefits. And you get this warped reason that people are hanging on there. So I don't know whether this benefit package is appropriate in the industry, because I don't know this industry. And I don't know whether it requires or should warrant on the part of the board any further discussion or analysis as to what kind of health benefits. But one thing is for sure, that this is different than the trend that I've seen in private industry. And it is a very, very attractive package, which may be entirely appropriate. But I think a reason that we are a board and the reason we're here is to go ahead and understand and to consider the overall benefit package as part of the compensation package. And so I would say that I would support this proposal under the circumstances and congratulate you for doing an outstanding job. And I would put it on the backs of the board to go ahead and continue to evaluate whether or not this approach is appropriate in today's day and age and in the future. Thank you.
Mr. Curtis, do you have any openings for stagehand or pin setter?
We'd be happy to accept an application at the appropriate time. I will note, having just come from another comparable organization, these are good benefits. I had better benefits in Detroit. So I think you find a range in the industry as you would at a hotel chain or all other industry organizations. There's also obviously the combination of salary and benefits. I would say on a salary side, we're probably a little bit lower than the norm. The benefits may be at the norm or slightly higher. The net effect is a competitive package, but certainly not something that people are beating down the doors to take advantage of. No.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Any other applications? Remember, you want a job that is 30 hours a week or more. Right. Sorry. Hearing no further discussion, is there a possible motion on the insurance plan? Thank you very much. Motion by Ms. Carano, second by Mr. Curtis to approve. This is an action item. Is there any public comment? Seeing none, all those, any additional discussion of the motion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say no. That passes unanimously. Thank you. Now that takes care of the three critical items that the President suggested. I believe everyone has signed the budget who is present. Okay, everyone is good. And I believe Mr. Dortch may have a motion.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think we can move this along if we look at items K through Q. Those are all written submittals on our facilities. I mean, if there's no questions regarding those, I'd like to move to approve those and get those out of the way.
Second.
We can accept a motion, and a second motion by Councilman Dortch, second by Councilwoman Zadra. And now, you've had the written submittals. Are there any questions that members do have on any of the consent items? Mr. Hawkins. Mr. Hawkins withdraws a question. That is all right? That's acceptable? No, this is important stuff. Go ahead. The, Mr. Councilman Dortch, there is a question as to whether or not this includes Q. Council has a question.
I did not include Q, or, yeah, I did include Q.
Q facilities? Okay. And I believe facilities committee did not in fact hold a meeting.
No, sir, but we can pull that. I can go through K through P if people have questions on Q.
I think Joe can explain.
I think they're all pretty routine. We have a lot of standard events, and there's nothing of real relevance within the client critiques or the written submittals on facility activity.
Please be advised that the motion did not include R, This is our last shot at legislative update.
Hopefully.
Well, as scheduled, the time in regulation, those, yes, last board meeting before the end of the session. All right, Mr. Curtis.
Now that you mention it, I actually do have a question on Q. And we do these periodically, Joe. We got a sample size of 1 on the Reno Event Center, which is not a big sample. And and you kind of wonder, sample size of 6, sample size of 8. More importantly, I think or more revealing anyway, was when we learned that the snaffle bit competition might be in jeopardy as a result of certain improvements at the Reno Livestock Event Center. And so I would simply ask you from a anecdotal perspective, are people happy? And is there anything in your opinion that needs to be recognized in terms of capital improvements or things that how's it going and what's going to happen, I guess?
Well, capital improvement wise, we're actually okay at the convention center and in very good shape in downtown. We've identified the challenges we have at the Livestock Event Center. To the agenda item, the client critique, the snaffle bits is happy with the operation of their show and so forth, which is what the client critique in the agenda item addresses. They do have concerns about the capital for their long-term growth of the show.
But on that topic, I think it's relevant to this conversation to note that the city of Reno has stepped up and is contributing $100,000 for the Livestock Event Center sound system from the $2 fund, and is also going in 1/3 on a new sign for the Livestock Event Center with the RSCVA and the Reno Rodeo. And those are just things that Joe was able to coordinate. Our thanks to Dwight and Sharon for their support on that $2 fund, those funds being used that way. It's a good show of how we can find solutions sometimes to challenges that initially present a real obstacle. So we're going to be able to address the worst of the restroom situations, the sound system, and the sign on a timely basis this year, which are some of the things that Snaffle Bit was had on the top of their list. So that's good news, and we do thank the city of Reno for their support.
Sure. And again, my question is more, are people generally happy?
They are.
And I guess the reason I ask that is because when you're out there, drumming up business, that's a really important thing to have happen.
I see every critique. And by the way, if we get one critique, that's because there was one event.
Yeah.
We typically get 100% completion of those critiques. Almost everybody fills them out and returns them. It's a very good return rate. I see them all. I used to see a lot of food and beverage complaints before we changed providers. Those have gotten much better now. I occasionally see complaints about the facilities, especially at the Livestock Event Center, but it's typically overcome by great staff, great event, good to be back, a lot of positive comments, and then sure would like to see some money spent here, that kind of thing. So they're with us. They just feel they have to acknowledge that we sure wish that, this would be fixed at some point. And, when there's an issue that comes up, I will contact Joe and he'll follow through on it, but it's very few and far between.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Any other discussion? Seeing none, this is a public, this is an action item, rather. Are there any requests to speak? Is there any public comment? Seeing none, all on the motion, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say no. That passes unanimously.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'd like to send, to give you a drawing of hopefully what, with the cooperation that Mr. Baum just brought up with the City of Reno, the RSCVA, and the Reno Rodeo, our intent is to hopefully have this up prior to the Reno Rodeo this year. I'll send this around just so everybody kind of has an idea of what our existing board looks like and then what the new one will, just for your review.
I think it's also worth noting this is being done on a very cost-effective basis by partnering with the ESCO on an existing sign and getting it for below the price of a brand-new sign. So it's a good quality sign that meets our needs but is available for a fraction of the cost of a brand-new operating unit.
That sounds great. Look forward to seeing the art and to seeing the finished product.
Just have one question, if I could.
Go ahead.
There's dimensions given on the new sign, but not on the old sign. Any idea what the dimensions of the old sign are? Just so I can compare.
Well, the sign part, just for your,
Again.
for your information, okay, on the top left where it says it says Reno Rodeo.
Okay.
And then and then right next to it, that's all video. And where it says Dodge Trucks, that will be a sign. That's a stagnant sign where it says Dodge Truck. The part to the left will be video.
It fits within the existing framework, I believe.
It's all gonna fit, yes.
Okay. Oh, that's the existing sign here, and
Yes, sir.
that just goes in that insert, okay.
Yeah,
I got
so-
it.
As many of you know, it's
Now I get
almost
it.
illegible right now, so we had to address the fact that you really couldn't read what the messages were. But we're not throwing away the overall framework.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, would that take us to item R, legislative update? That's how I read the,
That or
Agenda.
President's report, however you'd
Oh.
like to.
how extensive is the president's report if we're going to lose members who may want to talk about legislative?
Well, that's fine, yeah, on that point, why don't we do the legislative and then we can follow.
All right, without objection, we'll go to R, the legislative report. And that is presentation by Mr. Scolari and Mr. Higgins. I believe Brett will be making the presentation today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I start, Molly just brought to my attention, we did the goals. Item C. But actually, item I, we still need to do, so I just wanted to flag that. The discussion that was approved was item C, so actually, item I on the policy, we still need to do that as well. I think those got mixed up,
Okay.
so if you want to take that after the legislative report.
Okay.
Or you can do a motion now.
Why don't we do that, why don't we do item I now? Mr. Councilman Dorsch.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve item I.
And this is as to the policy. I think the motion technically that we accepted
C and
was,
I together.
was as to
Yeah.
the goals.
I just want to make the record clear on item I, if we could.
Okay. I as to policy.
If I may. The only change to the policy was the fact that currently the policy reads that goals are to be submitted and reviewed by the Personnel and Finance Committee. And it was a decision that, or a recommendation that be changed to the Marketing Committee to review those first. And so if there was to be any change to the policy, we needed to have that change here. And so that's why that item is on the agenda.
Any desire as to the policy? Mr. Hawkins?
Just to reiterate, so it goes to marketing, then personnel, and then finance.
Personnel and Finance is one. Right.
Oh.
So, but yes, it can go to both if that is the desire of the board.
Mr. Curtis?
I'm not going to repeat what I said under item C.
Thank you.
But my thoughts are about the same, okay? I was opposed to much of this in December. I remain opposed to much of it, and am encouraged at the potential for continued discussion in this regard. But I will be not supporting this particular motion. Thank you.
And if I may, anytime this board wants to change any of its policies, you're able to do so, to bring, so.
Does that prompt any additional discussion, questions?
Just clarification in the motion that I think is what we requested is exactly what Mr. Hawkins mentioned is it goes to marketing first with their recommendations to personnel and finance and then to the board.
The old three-step process.
And with respect to timing, currently it has that those goals would start in April. And I was just curious if you want to move that back to March and then have it at the April finance meeting, or if you want to do it all in April.
I think that probably makes sense, doesn't it?
Probably does. Yeah, stagger it. Mr. Dorsch?
Yeah, I think that probably makes sense since we're adding that extra step in there to move it back to March.
Okay, thank you.
So I would include that in my motion also.
Is the seconder okay with that amendment? Movement and seconder have amended the motion as to a March at marketing, and then April as to personnel and finance, and then board approval.
Or as soon as. I mean, it might be able to go to personnel and finance in March also, and then the board in April.
It's an ASAP motion.
Right.
Got it.
We like those? Okay.
The process starts in March.
A March start. Okay, everyone clear on the motion? This is an action item. Is there any public comment? Seeing no public comment, we will close that. Is there any additional discussion on the motion, now as amended slightly? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say no. That passes. That passes with Mr. Curtis opposed. No other members opposed? Is that correct? All right. Then that would take us back to item R.
Mr. Chair, I'm one of those that needs to rush off to another public budget hearing for Tumwas. So, but before we do, I've already spoken to the CEO, but for the board's information, we've requested an update from John Porter and team for activities that we've had going back in DC for regional efforts for economic development, and specifically a week ago, an invitation that we had for a presentation in front of Commerce and Trade by the Chairman of Commerce and Trade, the Congressional Committee. So we'll be giving you an update and kind of future plans on where we intend to go with that for a future agenda item.
We look forward to that. Thank you very much. And this is this is a semi-critical item, but we realize that people with this extraordinary date may have other places to go, and we will not count off points if you do have to leave. Brett, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A lot of exciting, I guess, stuff to talk about today, and as we're approaching the end of session. I have at your place an updated status report that I'll go through. I'm going to focus on some bills that we're working actively on for the RCVA. If I go too quick, stop me and ask questions, but I'll go through the other ones pretty quickly. AB 19 is the fairgrounds bill that gets rid of the advisory committee on the use of the land and rolls those duties into the junior livestock board, and also adds a rodeo person on that board. As I reported, the fairgrounds are subject to a use trust that the county lives by, and then the county has a management contract with us for that property. So this board actually, I think, will be active and proactive, and it could result in some good partnering with the RCVA and the state. Joe and Brian and I have already met with the state agricultural folks and they've given some office space and talked about things that could be done at that site. So we think that's a pretty positive move. AB 31 and AB 65 are the Attorney General bills on public records and open meeting law. AB 31 has got a fiscal note on it, so it's in the money committees. 65 has been moving through. It's been amended significantly. The high points on that are in an open meeting law violation. Now public agencies are allowed to do corrective action within a certain amount of time instead of getting an automatic violation from the Attorney General, which is positive. Also, now we're required to have a contact person for posting materials, which we already do through Charlotte, so that's not a big deal to us. It also organizes the exemptions that exist in law for the open meeting law and put those in the statute in a little bit better order. But all in all, I think both those bills will probably make it through. AB 118, which was going to establish the legislative open meeting law and make them subject to it. No surprise, there hasn't been any action on that since February 28th. AB 172 is just something I'm watching. We do, as a public agency, have Public Works. There's been a lot of discussion, controversy, et cetera, on construction managers at risk. So there's an appetite for the leadership to try to rein that in a little bit. What happened was the construction manager's at risk. While it's a good idea, there wasn't a lot of Nevada contractors that had the experience. And so we're seeing a lot of out-of-state companies coming in and taking work from the local companies, so it's become quite an issue. It just affects us from the standpoint, if we ever want to use that method for construction, we want to be aware of the changes. AB 286, this was the one that we talked about last time that had, which the premise of it is the special events over 2,500 persons will now be required to have certain medical services depending on what category you fit into. There's different categories depending on the amount of patrons at the event. The premise of this bill came from Assemblywoman Lucy Flores. She had a horrible experience with the marathon down in Las Vegas. There was some sickness that happened with a lot of the runners, and the emergency medical services weren't there to provide services for those folks participating, so that was a premise. We've had a lot of discussion. We've been working closely with her. One thing you'll see, and this is up today, it's a mock-up amendment of it. We can turn to that. One issue we had obviously was at our facilities, if we have an event that has those certain amount of patrons, whether it be a concert or a convention or a trade show, our facilities are already equipped and our contracts already spell out certain provisions for emergency medical services. So she effectively agreed to amend and not include those facilities that would already have a plan in place for emergency medical as part of a special event. So they're not included as in the definition of special event. So that's already been adopted as part of the bill. The other issue that came up, and I've talked to Beth Cooney quite a bit on this issue, is the Victorian Square issue. If you have a rib cook-off or Star Spangled Sparks, they have effectively, they can hit a pretty high number of people. They have a fire station that's close by. All said and done, the sponsor was not willing to exempt the Victorian Square per se, but what she did do was include that if there's those amount of patrons at any one time, so which would help Victorian Square from what I understand it. They never hit 50,000 at one time. 50,000 in this bill, if you hit 50,000 people, you have to actually have 2 medical doctors on staff, which is a pretty high price ticket for these folks. The other issue that this bill is, there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of back and forth. She based this bill off of what City of Reno currently does. So when you go to get a special events permit with the City of Reno, as part of your permit, and I did some research on this, you have to abide by certain emergency medical services depending on the size of your event, and it's set forth by the health district, and the City of Reno has adopted that as part of their special events criteria. So this is really based on stuff that our special events are already doing. Everything got kind of swirled up, but Hot August Nights was worried. Now they're not worried because after everyone talked, they realized that City of Reno is already doing it. So the concern of this bill has kind of died down, except for maybe the Victorian Square issue, which we're still going to try to work on with the sponsor. So if there's any questions on that, I can move on.
Just one, Brian. How many people are at Victorian Square? I mean, it seems like there's more than 50,000 to me. Maybe you don't know that number, but
I've heard different. Beth tells me she doesn't think they ever hit 50,000 people at any given time, but they may.
Huh.
You know, it could be a function of how they get permitted with the City of Sparks to help them with this state law. So we're kind of thinking through maybe there's some ways we can help Sparks and the Rib Cook-Off and Star Spangled Sparks
Touring events. Yeah.
find a way that they can fit in this statute so they can comply with those and not hit that 50,000 mark. So, but according to Beth, they typically don't hit that at any one given time. Now, during the whole event, you know, it's hundreds of thousands probably, but it's a 4 or 5 day event. So,
Mr. Baum?
I was just going to say, there's some rather fanciful numbers bandied about on these big events, and you hear them so often, then after a while, you think there's 500,000 people everywhere in town. And it's really hard to say when you're on the ground and it's so crowded how many people that is. The reality is a lot of the numbers are cumulative numbers, and even those are a little bit exaggerated. So it may seem like more than 50,000 people there, but 50,000 is a lot of people in an area that size. And I think sometimes psychologically, we've been told these big numbers for total attendance so many times that we assume that what is in fact 50,000 people is 500,000 people. It's almost impossible to estimate with a great degree of accuracy.
Mr. Curtis?
Just a comment, and of course, this will make no difference, but I'll make it anyway. The city of Sparks has worked hard in trying to redefine themselves to some degree as a place where it's happening here and to go ahead and encourage special events. And of course, the RCVA participates in that effort as well in terms of encouraging special events. And one of the things that we did as a brand leadership team when we were working with the city of Sparks was to identify what are the hang-ups with regard to special events. What is it that makes it difficult? Why can't we go ahead and attract more special events? Why can't we, how can we make it more smooth? How can we make it more streamlined? And your comment that the city of Reno already requires event organizers to go ahead and do certain things is a very little solace to me, because the fact is, it's a hassle. And so while I don't want to diminish the safety concerns that are expressed by the author of the bill, I do hope that she recognizes that there are trade-offs that need to be recognized, and that you may wind up accomplishing one thing and shoot yourself in the foot in another way. And I'm sure that you're the one that's going to be advising her of that, and that, of course, we'll see what happens. But nevertheless, I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, and we have communicated with her on the Sparks issue quite a bit. Sparks itself and their police and fire have been a little bit quiet. It's kind of been us out in the front on this. So it's been a difficult kind of thing to get her to move on the issue, but she does understand that Sparks Victorian Square is unique, and it really is a venue in and of itself. So we'll continue to work on it as best we can to try to get her to maybe even soften that up a little bit more.
And do we as an organization have any issue with regard to supporting special events in general that should be communicated to our lobbyists? No?
If there's no more questions on 286, AB 342 was that, this is a Republican initiative, don't see it moving at all, but it does provide for a hybrid public employee benefit program that would put some caps and limits on things on new hires after January 1, 2014. I wouldn't expect that to move unless there's some sort of horse trading at the end that on taxes or something else that the Republicans put this out as something that they want. 364 and 374, 364 really is just something we're monitoring as far as this has to do with military personnel and allowing them certain benefits and time of leave for things. AB 374 was the Burning Man bill that would effectively eliminate Pershing and Story County's ability to institute exorbitant fees on them, which has been it's been quite the issue with the county and the Burning Man folks. It's been kind of fun to watch, actually.
We don't call that the Burning Man bill. We call that the anti-county bill.
The RCVA has taken no position on that bill. AB 438, this one, it's really more for elected officials, and I just have it as a flag, just watching it. It provides for a cooling off before a elected or appointed officer could actually act as a lobbyist on behalf of an organization. That's making its way through. AB 445 is a bill brought forth by the Speaker, and she which I think is a good bill, and I don't think we're going to have any issues with it. She has asked for the state to institute basically a website repository for all public meetings. So the RCVA meeting will be required to be posted on this one site. So you can go to this one state site, and it'll have a link to our agendas and our board materials at one site. So you'll be able to go to the county, city meetings, all the state meetings, all our RCVA meetings, all the local governing body meetings. She hasn't seen much resistance on that because it's not a huge deal for folks to just provide a link for the state.
Is that a supplement to paper posting?
It is. It has not been a supplement to paper posting, but I think we're moving that way because the smaller counties have asked not for it to be a supplement to paper posting. So
You want to do away with the paper?
right,
posting?
I think we're moving that way. I think we'll probably see that by next session,
Okay.
maybe. AB 498 is, I think you've all heard and read about it. It is the NEAT tax, the Nevada Entertainment and Emissions Tax. Currently, we have a live entertainment tax. Based on your capacity, you either pay a 5% or a 10% tax on the admissions. Before I even go into this bill has a long way to go. Even the speaker has acknowledged that it has a long way to go. Not to say that we're not prepared and we're not working on it. What it essentially does is her premise for bringing the bill is really to eliminate exemptions, loopholes, et cetera, that she's seen in the live entertainment tax, and she's actually made it very broad. As it's written now, it would propose an 8% tax on admissions into anything that relates to entertainment, recreation, and I have a copy of the bill for everyone here. Place of amusement, sport, recreation, or other entertainment includes, and it goes through a litany of things. It would include, right now it includes convention and trade shows, any live entertainment venue, so anything, gym memberships, green fees, you name it, movies would be subject to this. Now, the additional component, which is part of the law now, a live entertainment venue would also pay 8% on the food and beverage sold. We have met 2 or 3 times now with the speaker. If it moves, and she even said this, if it moves, she will exempt convention and trade shows. She's committed to that if it moves. And that's a big if right now. The other issue we have, and we're working with her on this too, if it moves, when we share in a promotion of a concert with, let's say at the Reno Event Center, part of those receipts will be taken in by the RCVA. Part of those receipts are taken in by private entities. Right now on the bill, if the admission receipts, food and beverage receipts are retained and collected by the public entity, then they're exempt from the tax. So there's an issue, well, if you're cross-promoting with a private entity. So we're working with her on that. I would expect this probably to move a little bit more. The main target of her bill, really, when you cut down to it, is there was an exemption in the original live entertainment tax for the Speedway, and then there's the Electric Daisy Carnival. Those were her major targets for this bill. They didn't have a great hearing on this. We were in the background for a reason. We were working with her behind the scenes on the convention and trade show issue. If you antagonize her, the more she wants to get this passed. So what we've done is kind of taken a more proactive approach and tried to work with her on RCVA specific issues. But again, I think this thing has a real long way to go. I don't want to get us too excited about it. We're going to be very proactive on our issues. Our green fees at Wild Creek, like I said, those would be exempt because we collect and retain those. But again, it has a long way to go. I can answer any questions, or if anyone has any other thoughts or direction to us on this, be glad to take that. Okay.
100% chance of veto.
Oh, that's the other thing. The governor did come out very strong. His education budget, he wants passed as is, and he's not entertaining to sign any bills that have new taxes in them. So this, effectively, yesterday, he sent the message that he would veto this upon arrival. SB 165 is the film production credit bill. We've seen a very positive movement on this bill in the last couple of weeks. You might have read where Nicolas Cage came and testified in front of the Finance Committee. We received word late yesterday that the Senate majority is actively negotiating with the governor on some amendments to this bill to get his support and move the bill as part of the end game of the legislature. So we're very excited about that. We think that's a positive step. We don't have any details on what amendments are being discussed, but as soon as we have them, we'll get them to Chris and we can react accordingly. But we've seen some positive on that. We think there's a pretty good appetite from the leadership in both houses to get something done on the film tax credit. So we'll keep watching that and keep supporting that with the caveat that it won't affect local governments, as you guys have put on our support. 171's the other one we've been watching. That's the matching grant on public and public works that could potentially help this organization. Another end game bill. I think it's going to be it's a bill that Debbie Smith really wants to get through. So if there's a way to get it through at the end with all the horse trading, I think you might see something come out on it. I think it has a tough road, but we're actively watching that and supporting it. SB 228 was a bill brought by the Ethics Commission. It's just something that I've watched. It has some minor tweaks here and there on the Ethics Commission and how they operate and how public officials and public officers would report to them. And then 283 is a companion bill to that. It kind of codifies a standard of review when the Ethics Commission is looking at potential violations. SB 509, that's the Sparks room tax bill that would reinstitute the 2.5% for the Victorian Square improvements. That's moved through quite rapidly, and Sean just texted me. It did receive a due pass last night in the Assembly Committee on Taxation. So the final step for that would be a approval by the full Assembly and signature by the governor. It's my understanding Sparks and the Nugget and other folks, stakeholders in Sparks, have reached out to the governor and are getting his support to sign it because it is a tax bill.
Mr. Scolari?
Yes.
Can I ask something about that real quick? Is that
Sure.
To utilize 2.5% of the existing room tax collected?
So in 2003, I reported on this, I think, a couple months ago. In 2003, there was a 2.5% in Sparks only, properties only, additional room tax instituted to support public improvements for Victorian Square.
Yeah.
There was a provision in the statute that wasn't caught. They paid off some bonds. This tax went away. So this is just reinstituting tax to continue, allow them to continue to use that.
Thank you.
SJR 9 is moving through as well. It's on work session today, and that one will just make it a little bit easier through the BLM, is urging the BLM to make it a little bit easier on permits for special events on public lands, which has got wide range support from folks. And obviously, we're watching that because of our special events aspect to that. So that, Mr. Chair, is our exciting legislative report.
Thank you very much. Does that raise any questions by members? We had some questions as we went along. All right. This is not an action item. I believe. There's no action solicited or
I haven't requested any action. If there's any direction or action that you would like to take, specifically to anything we discussed, I'm happy to take that, but otherwise, I'm not asking for anything specific. It's really a lot of balls in the air as far as end of session game goes, so it could be a very interesting 3 weeks, needless to say.
it could. All right. Then,
Mr. Humke, would you guys like to accept that report as it was an action item, I think, on the agenda?
to accept the item.
Move to accept the report.
There's a motion by Councilman Dortch, a second by Mr. Hawkins. Since it's now an action item, is there any public comment on the item? Seeing none, any discussion of the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say no. That passes unanimously. Right? Yes, unanimously. Okay, those are the so-called substantive items, I believe. Oh, I'm sorry, President's update.
Did we do the marketing consent too?
No offense taken.
Sorry.
Well, you've all received this, so I'll just give some of the highlights. I noted that I returned from a trip to the Midwest where I was able to make joint sales calls with our national sales manager in Chicago. Chicago's a tough market, and it's one that I wanted to personally spend several days in with her to kind of size things up. As I noted in my president's report that you received, that market is typically associated with medical and dental organizations, and there are far more of those there than any other part of the country. The downside on that is that many destinations have a tough time with medical groups in particular, and also dental groups, because doctors often see convention and conference attendance as a way to sneak in a vacation, and as such, they like to go to the places that they think are upscale and desirable and they can brag about when they get back home. And this is a very widespread issue. It's been around for many decades. So there's a fairly short list of destinations that tend to attract a lot of the medical and dental meetings. The good news is there are also hundreds of other organizations in the Chicago region that have potential and span a wide range of industries and activities, and those are the ones that we're really putting our major emphasis on. We do get some medical groups from time to time, but primarily it's groups that are not of a medical orientation. I cited a couple, National Association of Black MBAs. That was actually a group we booked in Detroit when I was there. We had a very good session with them, and through that session, she is in discussion with us now about having their top executives come here for a high-level planning session on the future of their organization, which would be a great way to expose their officers to the desirability and value that this destination represents. Society of Tribologists and Lubrication Engineers. There's an association for everything, and that group is all about international study of reducing friction. And I actually did a campaign that made a play on that when we were in Detroit that was very successful with them. We had a very good meeting with them as well. So we are making progress with a lot of these groups that have never been to our region, but it takes a lot of good salesmanship and answering a lot of questions over time. We called on Snap-on Tools. They're based in Kenosha, Wisconsin, which is not too far outside of the Chicago metro area. They appreciated us coming up to their headquarters, and we have several opportunities with them. They are very much a national organization that has a unique model where tools are distributed in their trucks to places where mechanics work. Interestingly enough, their number one market is aircraft. So when you hear Snap-on Tools, you probably think cars and trucks, but actually the government and aircraft maintenance is actually their biggest market segment. So we're making good forward progress with them. And we call on many other organizations. It's good for me to hear, too, what I hear indirectly through our national sales managers, and that is airlift comes up in virtually every conversation. We're able, in many cases, to satisfy them on that. It still is an issue for groups that are heavy on the East Coast, especially if they've got a lot of folks in the New York, D.C. Area because of the connections that are required. It's a little less so for groups that have a heavy Midwest or West Coast orientation where we can offer more nonstop service. But it does come up frequently. We address it, and in most cases, it's not a deal killer, but it is a concern. The value proposition goes over very well. John Leinen has often stated the $40 a gallon coffee note is well received, and I can tell you it's amazing how many chuckles we get on that and people shaking their heads because they all have horror stories of paying over $100 a gallon for a cup for coffee for their attendees all over the country. And we are able to present a very specific price comparison against other Western destinations that show just how much people can save from coming here. So, good series of calls. I did, after 2 full days of calls in Chicago, flew down to Dallas, Fort Worth for a very interesting multi-hour meeting at the headquarters of Southwest Airlines. Chris Bart had invited me to come along to talk about the exciting new way we're positioning our region to our #1 air carrier. As you all know, they've got 55% of our service here, so they're a very important partner. And they had not heard from the CVA directly about what we're doing differently as of the last year on how this destination is marketed. I must say that they were very attentive in my presentation, and John Kirby, who is the head of their scheduling, was the key man in the room. It was interesting to note, instead of looking at the screen where my PowerPoint was presented, he was looking at me the entire time, which is kind of unusual in a presentation. And at the end, they said they were very impressed and felt we were right on target with our new approach. So that was good news to hear from Southwest. It was also very good news to hear from them that the first quarter was quite strong for them in Reno Tahoe. And they were very, very pleased with that performance. Said they were cautiously optimistic about the rest of the calendar year based on the way the year started out for them. Obviously, we had a lot of convention business. We had bowlers. We had a much better ski season. And we also have a slightly improved national economy. But they noted their first quarter was markedly better. We told them that our hotels performed quite a bit better in the first quarter too. So the meeting ended on a very positive note. They also indicated they feel that their right sizing had really reached an equilibrium point. They had changed the gauge of aircraft they put on here. They'd cut back the service a bit to get higher load factors on the bigger planes they'd put in place. And as much as we may not want to hear it, if they're receiving the load factors and the profitability they need, that's what we need in this market. Because until they get to that point, talking to them about anything new is not even on the table. And I think as much as we'd like to think that our charming personalities and effective PowerPoints are going to make the difference, it really is them finding the profitability levels that their CEO demands, which, as we've noted previously, is a 15% ROI. They never in the history of their company have reached that, but they're now getting close to that now in all the markets they serve. So, ironically, there was an article literally the next day in the Wall Street Journal, and that article talked, the headline was, Leaner Airlines, Meaner Routes, and the opening paragraph was, if you're having trouble finding flights to Memphis, Pittsburgh, or a host of other cities, you're not alone. Talked exactly about the way all the airlines around the country have pulled back, how it's impacted small market airports dramatically, but actually the biggest impact has been mid-size airports because there was more service to cut. So 26% reduction by all airlines in the kind of airports that we operate here. And in the map that was in the Wall Street Journal, there was a dot right at Reno Tahoe as one of the markets affected by that 26% decline. So misery loves company. There are a lot of other markets that are as bad or worse than we are in terms of this changing model for the airlines. It also called out Southwest specifically and said they had added 10% service to the biggest airline hubs and had cut back 15%, I believe, in the mid-size hubs. So our biggest carrier was cited as putting more of their eggs in the large market basket because the long-haul routes are considerably more profitable for the airlines. And the smaller regional jets that were so popular 5 or 10 years ago are now totally out of favor. And if you want to buy one, there are an awful lot of them available because they're gas guzzlers compared to the bigger, more modern aircraft that seat 150 to 200 people. So very interesting developments in that regard, and we will certainly look to work with the new CEO of the Airport Authority going forward to have more of those joint presentations to the carriers who serve our market, because we think that it's great when the airline folks talk to the airline folks, but when the tourism guys come in and say, you know, we're doing things differently, and you're going to see the results of that down the road, it gives them hope that these markets are not just stagnant, that there are changes going in place that'll help them get more people here. As we've said before, the biggest way to get more air service is to increase demand. If they think they can make money, they're going to put more flights on. I'm also delighted that we've now rolled out our new pricing model for the Reno Event Center and the Reno-Sparks Convention Center. This is a model that affects hotels that use those facilities for business that is primarily housed in one property. So downtown, the Tri properties sometimes need the Reno Event Center for a specific convention group they're going after that doesn't go further afield in using hotel rooms elsewhere in town. The Atlantis and the Peppermill very often have a need for bigger spaces at the convention center. In the past, we had a pricing model that was based on the way things used to be done, but the market has changed and people are giving away a lot more things, and we wanted our partners, based on their feedback, to have a more competitive price chart to go with. So John met with the sales and marketing team from the large properties around town, worked out a new pricing schedule. It's really 25 to 35% less expensive for our partner hotels now to use our facilities, which makes it more competitive for them. And we are already negotiating several groups based on that new approach. So good example, the RCVA listening to our partners, coming up with a solution. It's hard to come up with something that everybody is equally happy with, but I think we did a fair job on this one, and the new pricing is much more appropriate based on 21st century realities of how convention centers price themselves in general. As Sharon Zadra noted earlier, she and Bonnie Weber were back in Washington, D.C. They did a joint call on the American Public Transit Association with Allison Farr, one of our national sales managers in D.C. They also had some legislative discussions, and through that conversation, Sharon was asked to speak in front of a Senate subcommittee on tourism about the impact of tourism. She asked me for the RCVA support on her travel expenses and also our team support on putting together the presentation. And I want to thank Jennifer and her team for doing a great job in just a couple days putting together a very complicated presentation that had both local, state, and national numbers and trends worked into what is a 3-minute presentation. There was a link in the President's report if you wanted to go take a look at that, but there will be further discussion of that at a future board meeting. I think it's worth noting that this is a partnership between the RCVA and regional transit and elected officials to perhaps get more out of Washington, D.C. when it comes to transportation issues for Northern Nevada. So there'll be more on that in the future, but it's a worthwhile effort. Interesting note that JWT, J. Walter Thompson, put out their annual list of top 10 trends. This is something they've done for many, many years. And the new trends, somewhat redundant, I thought, but I'll quickly go through them. What they see as sort of the hot topics in the business world now are play as a competitive advantage. People are getting burned out, and people who put on meetings and conventions and other programs for their employees and their members really need to be cognizant of the fact that it can't be work, 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 work. People need a little bit of a breather in there, and I think people are more sensitive to that now after quite a few tough years where a lot of folks are losing steam. Super stress era, pretty much overlap with the other one, but life balance is in order, and more people are finally acknowledging that after maybe seeing some employees fall by the wayside. Intelligent objects, people go everywhere with their smartphones and iPads, and a lot of companies and associations are trying to figure out how they can take advantage of that in the programs and training they do for their employees and the association conventions they put on. If everybody in the room's got a smart app, what can you use? What you can do differently that allows people to use those as part of the process. Years ago, people had a little handheld unit where they could weigh in on topics, and suddenly you'd have the numbers up on the screen. That's old tech. Now you can ask people to use their smartphones to do the same kind of thing, but you have to adapt to that technology and put it in place for people to be able to respond with the equipment they're already having in their briefcase. Predictive personalization. Consumers are being targeted by their distinct behaviors. Online, it's not uncommon for people to insert cookies and watch what you do and then market to you as a result of that. Some people see that as intrusive. It's kind of a reality of the internet world. And how do you and your organization or company find a way to take advantage of that trend? Mobile fingerprint. Smartphones now, very often we'll go to a special event or a luncheon, and if you haven't paid before, they don't have an old machine to swipe your credit card. They've got a little unit plugged into their smartphone, and they zip it through that, and they send you the receipt at home on your computer. A lot of new technology, and the leading edge companies are responding to that and being early adopters and not late adopters. Sensory explosion. People are beside the traditional looking and hearing. People want to taste, smell, and feel the world. I noted in a previous meeting that I went to an event that was held at the High Regency Lake Tahoe, and instead of sitting around banquet tables and having another long, boring evening, we made food together and then had buffets It was more stand-up. It was more interactive. It was a very fun evening, and I'm seeing more and more of that, and this trend reflects that people are really shaking up the traditional banquet reception kind of model, the way restaurants are feeding people and offering food, and quite a bit going on in the food and beverage arena, especially as it relates to our industry. Everything is retail. You need to get creative when people are being asked to buy everything 24/7. Everywhere you go, somebody's trying to sell you something. It used to be emails and faxes. Now, it's television. It's in your car. It's on your computer. It's on your smartphone, and that's a lot more competition for people's sales dollars and their attention. People get burned out with all the messages they're being bombarded with. So, what can you do that's more effective so you don't get a lot of people just deleting your marketing? Peer power. New alternatives are constantly presenting new options on how to act, and that's kind of a generic one, but it kind of ties in with some of the others. Going private and public. On the internet, the world is watching, so be careful what they see. A lot of folks are taking false last names on their Facebook so that employers or other people they do business with can't really see their private life unless they know the secret code for their last name. So a lot of people are responding to the fact that maybe they've been a little bit too transparent in an internet world. And then finally, health and happiness again. Happiness is essential to overall health. Keep smiling. People are really, I think, in many ways, coming more sensitive to the fact that dropping dead is not great employee retention. Smith Travel Research released their latest national rooms report. Paul, you had mentioned STR earlier. Showed that national hotel occupancy grew 2.5% in 2012, and rates were up 4.2%. So certainly more growth than we've seen in our market here. New York's the most expensive city at $205 a night, and frankly, that sounds kind of low based on the anecdotal evidence you hear about people who travel to New York and the kind of rates they're being charged. $400 rates for a chain hotel is not uncommon, and if you go to the upscale side of New York City, $500, $600 a night for a room, not a suite, is very much the norm. That being said, San Francisco's at 153, Monterey 147, Palm Springs 144. So here's some markets that we compete against on a regular basis, certainly in the group arena, and also for vacationers. A place like San Diego or Monterey is in our competitive set when people are looking where to take a getaway. We're at $73. And even if we increased our rates by 50%, we'd still be the cheapest guys with a major destination in the Western marketplace. So we continue to hit that with our hotel partners. And based on the rates we got in the first quarter, I think there is hope. We have seen rates go up dramatically year over year. And I think that as we continue to diversify the kind of business we bring here, Barrett-Jackson has been noted as getting much higher, or paying much higher room rates in August than traditionally we've seen in that same week in the past. So the right customers are willing to pay a lot more than we typically charge here because we got a great product that they're seeing for the first time. I was on a follow-up call. I had mentioned earlier my frustration with the X Games, where some of our ski resort partners had at the very last minute changed direction over their previous activity and decided they didn't want to go after the X Games after all, primarily because of utilization of parking lots for equipment trucks and some things that I think were very much could be addressed with ESPN. So I took exception to the fact that that should have been discussed before we went so far along in the process. ESPN scheduled a conference call with us that I participated in, and it was very clear from their conversation from their corporate executives back in Connecticut that they were very disappointed because they saw Reno-Tahoe as being a leading candidate for the Winter X Games and that hybrid model we talked about. And they indicated they wanted to talk more internally after getting some feedback about what went wrong and come back to us perhaps with a new model that would be acceptable to Heavenly and Alpine Meadows to see if we could salvage this relationship. So all hope is not lost. I think professionally we should have handled it differently, but that was out of our hands. But I did assure them in the conference call that Reno-Tahoe USA was very anxious to continue the dialogue and work with them. And we were most confident that I indicated that our city manager had indicated full cooperation from the city of Reno in their interest in using some downtown venues along with the RSCVA. So I will update you on this as it develops, but there is the door is open a crack for this to continue. And I do believe in the same way that Barrett-Jackson provides an incredible marketing platform for us, 30 hours on ESPN worldwide would do the same thing for us. So it's great from a revenue standpoint, but it's also great from some very cost-effective marketing for this region. Our planning for our move in October, it sounded a long time away, but it's fast approaching. The sales and marketing department heads have walked through the space that currently is being utilized for our subtenants, have looked at the layout. Brian and his team continue to work on exactly what goes where, so we're in very good shape to have this take place in October with minimal disruption. And we continue to believe that the savings involved and the lack of moving expenses and the lack of disruption during the prime fall season makes this a very good solution to our needs going forward. Barrett-Jackson is coming in on a very regular basis now, virtually every week or every other week. We have a large contingent in from Speed Channel and Fox Sports and the Barrett-Jackson executive team and their minions, and they are working through all the many details for an event that has so many moving parts. The GM folks were in force for a week. I know the Ford folks are coming in as well. They are the big sponsors. This is a big deal with a lot of decisions to be made. Joe's done a very good job of working with them on the food and beverage front and has negotiated the fact that our best pricing goes to a limited subset of those coming, and that the larger group pays a more prevailing cost for their food and beverage requirements, like Ford and GM, for example. Those large corporations shouldn't get the same deal that we're giving to Barrett-Jackson executives for their personal needs based on our overall relationship. So it's looking good, and I think that their enthusiasm is reflected in the numbers. Over 450% higher year over year for what they've seen in Vegas and Palm Beach in terms of advanced ticket sales for Reno-Tahoe. So they're ecstatic with this, the kind of ticket purchases are being made quite far out for the Reno-Tahoe auction. They think it bodes extremely well. And as I noted to this group before, I said to Craig Jackson, we expect Reno-Tahoe to be number 2 behind Scottsdale, the granddaddy. And he laughed and said, you'll have to beat Las Vegas. And we think that we can do it. And we also think that a lot of the team members at at Barrett-Jackson think that Reno-Tahoe can do it as well. Their president and VP of consignments had not been here before. They were here last week. We walked them through the convention center, and they were blown away. It was clearly even more impressive than expected. And they echoed the comments of their CEO that this is the best facility that Barrett-Jackson will operate in anywhere in the country. And then the live entertainment tax bill has already been addressed, but we are very hopeful that one will go away and we won't have to deal with a very, very difficult competitive situation if that was ever applied to trade shows and conventions. That's not the norm nationally, and as we try to reestablish ourselves in that market, that would be a terrible anchor on us. So we're very pleased that Porter Gordon Silver has been able to negotiate that not being a part of the final bill, should it in fact gain any traction, as unlikely as that seems. So that is my President's report. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions of the President? All right. Is there a motion to accept the report? Motion by, who was it? Mr. Curtis, second by Councilman Dortch. This is an action item. Is there any public comment on this item? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Is there any discussion of the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say no. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. I'm reminded that we have yet to take items D, E, F, and G, and these are part of the consent. D, E, F, and G. Is there a motion to accept these items? There was a written report on these items. Motion by Ms. Carano, second by Mr. Hawkins. This is an action item. Is there any public comment on that item? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. Is there any discussion of the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, please say no. That passes unanimously. That would take us to items for future board meetings.
I just would like to know whether we can at least get a portion of the reserve analysis at the next meeting. Or how are we coming on that, or, I mean, I know you're busy, and I don't want to ask you to, it's not a make-work job. This is a serious deal.
Yeah,
But
we can do that.
Okay.
But maybe we can get some of it, particularly in the areas that we have some potential revenue. That might be worthwhile to understand where we are in terms of our capital needs.
Okay. Any other items for future board meetings? All right. Let us go to board member comments. Comments? Ms. Carano.
I see that there's some students in the audience. Can they introduce themselves maybe, or is this appropriate time? I'd like to know who they are. Or is maybe under public comment.
Combine that with public comment. You're being compelled to introduce yourselves. If you'd kindly come up to one of these microphones, then we can preserve your words for all time. Come on, everybody, come on. Cindy asked you, now you have to do it.
Yep.
Yes.
Press the button.
Okay. We are all four from Reno High, and we're seniors, and we have to observe public meeting for government class. So I'm Gage Avera.
I'm Erin Edison. I'm Missy Warren. Stephen Sharp.
And what have you learned?
It was really interesting, actually. There was a lot of, just a lot of like talking points that I've heard a little bit about, but never really anything in detail until now, so it's interesting.
That was interesting. Yeah, you guys discussed a lot more than I thought you would.
I'll agree with all of them, yeah.
We discussed millions of dollars. Who's your instructor?
Mr. Carlin?
Mr. Carlin?
Ours is Peter Schweiler.
Great.
Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you for coming. Thank you. That's very nice. Any other items? I have one member comment. We have a problem with Finance Committee, problem achieving a quorum. First step I'm going to take is to appoint Jerry Hall additionally to the Finance Committee. He loves meetings, let's face it, and so he'll that's right, and we'll take some other steps as needed so that we can achieve a quorum. Eventually, you'll all be appointed to finance if this keeps up. All right, any other comments? Then
Move to adjourn. Oh, you got public comments?
let's finish closing public comment. Is there any? Are there any cards? Any requests to speak under public comment? We've had the students. Thank you. Thank you, Reno High. Go Huskies. And we'll close public comment. And now, Councilman Dorch's motion.
Move to adjourn.
Motion second. Without objection, we are adjourned. Thank you.